Hey everyone, this is Will at Third and Long. Welcome to our Georgia Bulldogs 2024 way too early predictions video. So we're going to be looking at every single regular season game for the 2024 college football season. Go ahead, hit that like button and subscribe. We're going to be taking a look at everything college football and everything NFL football this coming year. Up to the season starts, we're going team by team, breaking down the whole schedules, the win, losses for every college football team. And once the season starts for both college and the NFL, we do the best bets every week, every game, who we think is going to win, lose, the spreads, money lines, and the over-unders. Let's take a look at these Georgia Bulldogs. Yes, they have some star players going off to the NFL. They have Brock Bowers. They have Ladd McConkey. They have a lot of defensive players that are going to go first round. This was a loaded team, but some of the things that are staying the same, one, quarterback. Carson Beck is back. Number two, coaching staff. You still have Kirby Smart at the helm, head coach. He is, with Saban gone, he assumes the mantle as the best head coach in all of college football. They still have Mike Bobo calling offensive plays. They still have Will Muschamp. They have Robinson as the defensive coordinator. This is still a very stacked team. Even with the players leaving from last season, this team is stacked. The number two total roster in all of college football. It's basically a next guy up mentality with the Georgia Bulldogs. Looking at their recruiting classes. Last year, they obviously finished with the number one class. Prior to that, they had the number two class. Prior to that, the number three class. So you see why this roster comes in as the best or the second best total top to bottom roster in all of college football. They are stacked at every single position. They've also had a lot of transfers coming in. Word out of spring is Mike Bobo is going to be going vertical a whole lot more often this season. So he's going to be getting the ball to those playmakers. Carson Beck should like that. He's going to put up some big stats, potentially 400 to 4,500 passing yards this season, and you have a massive target like Colby Young, who did really well at Miami, but he's going to get the ball more at Georgia. But let's get things started breaking down this schedule. So kicking things off, our very first game, August 31st in Atlanta, Georgia, we have the Clemson Tigers coming into the state of Georgia. Clemson is obviously one of those teams that has been at the top of college football for about the last 10 years now. Now, they've taken a little bit of a step back the last couple of years, but obviously this is a team with one of the best head coaching staffs in all of college football. They have Dabo Swinney. They have a really good defense. They had a top 10 defense from last season. They're going to be bringing that same defense back. They also still have Garrett Riley there as the offense coordinator. He's one of the best young minds in college football right now. And they have a lot of returning playmakers coming back on both sides of the ball. The defense, as we stated, is loaded, but they're going to have a really stacked offense too. Cade Klubnik was a five-star quarterback coming out of high school. He had a pretty good season last season, but he hasn't fully lived up to the hype so far. But do not take this game for granted. Clemson, they're trying to get out of this ACC. They want to show their chops. They want to show how strong they are to the rest of the country. What better way than to beat the potential number one team, Georgia Bulldogs, first game of the year? Clemson has beaten Georgia before. Georgia has beaten Clemson before. But when you have two top 10 defenses going at it, anything can potentially happen, because if one defense has the edge that day, they could shut the game down. This is not going to be a blowout, but I still have Georgia. They have the better quarterback play. They have the better roster, not knocking Clemson's roster. But I have Georgia winning this game in a really close one, though. I'd say it's probably going to be like a 28-20 win. So starting out the season 1-0. And Georgia has a pretty difficult schedule this year. Probably one of the 5 most difficult college football schedules total. Because the SEC, as we mentioned, is getting a lot tougher with Texas and with Oklahoma coming into the conference. Next, September 7th, we have Tennessee Tech. There's really not much to say this game. This game's obviously not going to be close in any way whatsoever. It's going to be a blowout, curb stomping. This is Georgia's first game home this season. They're going to beat Tennessee Tech. It's going to be probably like a 58-6 game. After that, we're getting into SEC play now. September 14th at Kentucky. They'll be playing Kentucky. Kentucky's one of those teams every single year. They roar out to 5-0, 6-0, completely fall apart after that, finish, 7-5 or 6-6. They're always overrated. Stoops, really good coach. They're going to have a very physical run game. They're going to have a very physical defense and a good defensive line. That's one thing that they always do well. But obviously, the talent here, there's a massive disparity. These teams are nothing alike, except the fact that they're physical. Stoops might be able to keep the game close, maybe for the first quarter. That's about it. Kentucky is always overrated, but you don't want to overlook them. Because of how physical they are, they can punch you in the mouth. But the problem is Georgia can obviously punch back, and they can punch a lot harder. Georgia's going to win this game. I could see this game maybe being like I think they're going to win it pretty good. So like a 34-35 to 17 game. So Georgia right now will be 3-0. Then September 21st, they're going into a bye week. And then one of the biggest games of the season, hands down, this is going to be a potential top 5 matchup, top 10 matchup. We have Georgia at Alabama. They're going to Tuscaloosa playing the Alabama Crimson Tide. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Saban, the GOAT himself, has retired. His whole coaching staff left. A lot of players transferred out. But Alabama still has a top 3 roster in all of college football. So even though some guys are out, even though the coaching staff has changed, do not overlook this roster. Milroe, as of right now, he's still the quarterback there. They're bringing in Kalen Deboer as the head coach. Kalen Deboer is an offensive guru, a really good coach. But obviously the GOAT just left. So you have to anticipate a little bit of a step back because he is the GOAT. But that's not a knock on Kalen Deboer. He will cement himself, but it's just how quickly will he be able to transfer this roster over to his style of play, over to that more of an air raid type offense. He does a lot of dink and dunk. He does a lot of deep vertical passes. That's Milroe's strength. He loves the deep ball. His biggest knock is the short and intermittent passes and waiting enough time and not being jittery in the pocket. Bama's offensive line last year wasn't the best they've had in recent years, but how can Milroe translate into DeBoer's offense? That's the biggest question mark, and we just don't know yet because we haven't seen it. I'm sure he will be perfectly fine, but they have some questions there just as this team is in this transferring time. Georgia at this point has had a couple games, has had a really tough game, so things are kind of starting to roll right now. The defense is starting to look really good. The offense is starting to get things going. Guys are stepping into the position to replace Bowers and stuff like that from last year. So the guys have had a couple weeks to find their roles. Same thing with Alabama. It's a whole new offensive scheme. It could take a couple weeks for the wheels to be greased and things to start rolling, but they should be getting into that point right now, getting closer to midseason where they're starting to roll. This is going to be a really close game. This is probably going to be, going into the fourth quarter as a one-possession game. I have Georgia having the edge here. I have Georgia getting the win in this matchup. I have them beating Alabama. It is going to be close, but I'm going to say like a 32-27 game. Very close game. Do not overlook it. Potentially whoever has the ball last can win this game. As of this point, Georgia is 4-0. Next game, we have Auburn. So Auburn will be coming to Georgia. Auburn, Hugh Freeze. Last year, they had a pretty decent defense, but their offense was a complete joke. They had Thorne at quarterback. Hugh Freeze has been working the transfer portal really hard. Look for their offense to be a lot better. Hugh Freeze is back to play calling himself this season. He's really good on offense. He's not afraid of Georgia. He was never afraid of Saban when he played Saban. He's not going to be afraid of Kirby Smart. That doesn't mean he's going to win the game just because he's not afraid of them, but that lets you know the mentality that he brings in with his team. But I have Georgia winning this game pretty comfortably. I'm going to say like a 35-13 game. It's not going to be close. After that, we have Mississippi State. Mississippi State, obviously, Lebby is now the head coach. Massive changes on both sides of the ball for Mississippi State. Completely retooling. The roster was not good in any way. Arnett did not leave this team in a good place. So Lebby has to completely rebuild it, especially on the offense. They in no way have the athletes or the firepower to in any way make this game competitive. That's not saying that they won't in the future. He knows how to call offense, but he just doesn't have the guys there yet. So Georgia should win this game pretty convincingly, and I think it's going to be pretty bad. I'm going to say like a 42-13 game. So as of right now, Georgia 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-0, and then another really tough game right after that at Texas. Going to Austin, Texas. Welcome to the SEC. Georgia, another potential top 5, top 10 matchup here, playing the Texas Longhorns, who are going to come into this season highly ranked to start things out. Texas's roster is not very far behind Georgia. Texas definitely is not going to be afraid of Georgia. They went to Tuscaloosa, beat the crap out of Alabama last season. They know they can do it. They have Quinn Ewers at quarterback. He's played on the big stage. They went to the playoffs last season. He knows what he can do. They're going to be, they had some running back issues last season at the end of the season. Had a lot of guys get hurt. Had their starter tear his ACL. He should be back. The wide receiver position, they're losing Worthy, but they have a lot of playmakers. They had a top 20 defense also last year, led by their defensive line. They got a lot of pressure. Texas is physical. Sarkisian's going to be dialing up some plays. They're going to be going vertical. This is a trip-up game here. Even though Georgia, these rosters are almost practically even. There's a lot of positions where they're basically the same. Texas, they want to make their footprint in the SEC, a new conference, a deeper, better conference. I'm actually going to go with Texas getting the win here. Georgia will probably be a slight favorite, 1.5 points, but you never know. But I'm going to go with Texas getting the upset. They're at home. This game's going to probably be at night. Texas is going to be really fired up. They're going to, if there's any game on their schedule, they definitely want to win. It's this one. Georgia can't afford to lose it. 12 teams are getting in the playoffs. So no matter what, Georgia's probably going to make the playoffs this year. So there's not as much riding on this. They are definitely going to try to win it. But if they lose, it's not the end of the world. So don't worry. Then they have a bye week. Then you obviously have the game versus Florida in Jacksonville here. You have the Florida Gators who, Billy Napier, I don't really know what to say. He's probably potentially going to be getting fired at the end of the season. They have a really rough schedule, probably the toughest schedule in the country. They're probably not going to get a bowl game back-to-back seasons. They made this game, somewhat competitive last season. They're definitely going to fight. It's a massive rivalry, one of the biggest rivalries in college football. But I have Georgia winning it pretty comfortably. I'm going to say they win it maybe like a 33-21 game. And the Texas game, I have being really close, like a 30-27. So after Georgia beats Florida, they then have Ole Miss going to Ole Miss, Oxford, Mississippi. This game's obviously going to be really tough. Ole Miss, they're going to be another top 10 matchup. Ole Miss is going to be really good this season. They work the transfer portal really hard. They have Lane Kiffin. He's obviously going to have a top 25 offense. He has a lot of offensive players coming back. Yes, they lost Quinton Junkins to Ohio State, but they honestly don't need him. They're deep at running back. They have the quarterback. They have the wide receivers. Their defense is going to be a lot better. They really work the defense and the defensive line and secondary in the transfer portal. How quickly can those guys adapt? No matter what, at this point of the season, they should have adapted to the new play calling. So they should be rolling along. Don't overlook this game. They want to win this game. They got spanked last season in this game. But I have Georgia winning again this season. I'm going to have Georgia winning. Maybe this game could potentially have some points to it. I'll have Georgia winning like a 38-27-28. So as of right now, Georgia is sitting at, how many wins is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8-1. So they're probably still in the top 5, if not just slightly out of it. Then they have Tennessee, another tough matchup. Tennessee's probably going to be ranked at this point of the season. Under Josh Heupel, this team's always going to have a really good offense. Last year, they actually surprisingly had a really good defense. They had a top 30 defense. They're bringing back a lot of starters. They have the 5-star coming in at quarterback. He's going to be the starter. Played really well in the bowl game, filling in for Milton. They're going to have the playmakers there. Tennessee's played the big games, but Tennessee's coming to Athens, Georgia, and Georgia's just a better, deeper team, better roster, better total coaching staff. I have Georgia getting the win here versus Tennessee. Probably about a 32-20 game. And then after that, they have UMass. What is there to say here? UMass has basically won, 3 games the last 2 years total. UMass is going to get spanked. It's the UMass Minutemen. This game's going to be close maybe for the first minute. That's about it. They're going to get it blown out. It's probably going to be a 55-3 type game. Then they have to end the season. They're now sitting at 10-1. Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech made this game really close last year. Some people say that Georgia should have lost it, could have definitely lost it. They did win the game, but Georgia Tech, they are going to be there to fight. They had a really good season last season. They win 8 or 9 games last year. They were a surprise team. They had that win versus Miami. They had the win versus North Carolina. They had some really competitive wins, and they played Georgia tough because they believed that they could actually compete with Georgia. But really, they caught Georgia hurt that game, Georgia limping into the game, not taking the game seriously, and they made Georgia work for it. They made them pay for overlooking them. I don't think Georgia does that again this year. They want to finish with a high note going into the SEC championship. I had Georgia beating Georgia Tech pretty good, probably like a 40-20 game. And that would end the regular season at 11-1. Obviously, that's probably going to get you into the SEC championship. I have Georgia, as of right now, with what we know on this roster, finishing the 2024 college football season 11-1, going into the SEC championship. Who are they going to play? The next highest ranked SEC team. It's a deep conference. There's going to be good teams. It could be a rematch with Texas. You know, they have the opportunity to make up for that loss, beat Texas. Maybe they're potentially playing Alabama again. If they play Texas, then I would probably give the edge to Georgia because they would have lost the first time. So now they would know what they need to fix to beat Texas. If they beat Texas the first time, I'd probably put my money on Texas because likewise with them, they would now be the ones fighting and they would know what they need to do to correct their issues they had the first game. But no matter what, Georgia's going to finish the regular season 11-1. They're obviously going to make the playoffs no matter what happens in the SEC championship. Win or lose, they make the playoffs this year. It's just, do they get that bye week first round? So that's my breakdown of the 2024 regular season way too early predictions for the Georgia Bulldogs. Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. If you have any comments, drop them below and I'll make sure to respond. Thanks.